Hello and welcome back to the Riddle Winging It Formula One podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Ledwell, and with me as my co-host for the first time,
Kieran Ledwell, Ellie's brother.
Ellie's brother indeed. Kieran, it's lovely to have you.
It's lovely to be here.
We
Ellie.
had you
Thanks
on
for having
before.
me. To rave reviews, yes,
You're very
you
welcome.
did.
Yeah, it was our best ever episode according to our father. And nobody else. I didn't get any feedback from anyone else.
Oh, okay. Well, our number one fan gave us our best reviews.
Our number one fan, yes.
Our number one fan.
Yeah. I would like to say to Harry, he is welcome anytime. He could have been on tonight, but he ignored my messages, so I guess this will be a surprise when he gets it in his inbox. But he could have replied, but he has a girlfriend, so he's busy.
Busy living his life.
Doing
not hardcore
busy
F1 fans like
exactly.
us. Recording in January.
Yeah.
Peak of the off season.
Yeah, there's a storm outside.
The big storm. There's
and
a big
I'm in
storm
here,
outside.
Down.
And there's a big storm at Maranello, isn't there, Ellie? Lewis Hamilton joining Ferrari for the 2025 season. What are your opening thoughts?
My opening.
See, that's what I'm going to bring
is
great segues. That's what I'm going to bring.
My thought is, everybody acted really surprised at the end of last year, at the beginning of last year when he was announced to be their new driver. I was not particularly surprised by that move because he has spoken regularly about wanting to join Ferrari and how he would love to race there, and it's Ferrari and it's Formula One and it's a match made in heaven. So I wasn't particularly surprised by the move, but it was definitely strange seeing the pictures of him, wearing his red.
Yeah, it looked stranger than I expected it to look, him in all red, definitely.
Yeah. The number 44 on a Ferrari was, I don't know, even though we knew for a year he was going there and it wasn't a decision that surprised me, I looked at the car and I was like, oh, the 44 in red, that just
looks strange. It'll take some getting used to, that's for sure. It'll take some getting used to.
Yeah.
Did you see on his, well, it's been announced for a while, but his first official post, Instagram post with Ferrari, some eagle-eyed viewers noted 7 windows in the background and 1 door, the 8th door to the 8th championship. What do you think of that?
I think that might be a bit of a stretch, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe they're confident. Yeah, I think
you've got to go in with that confidence, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And he's made much better career decisions than Alonso. Let's face it, Alonso could have a lot more world championships if it had been at the right team at the right time.
Yeah, well, exactly.
He's not made that decisions, but
Lewis
Hamilton,
has done it once before,
he
made the switch at the right time, so maybe he's done it again. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, exactly. When he went to Mercedes, everybody was doubting him, I guess. They wasn't going to a team with form for winning. It was a new team taking over from Brawn, and it wasn't a decision a lot of people really understood at the time. And obviously that was a very fruitful partnership. So maybe he's done that again. Maybe
time will tell.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll see a bit more after testing, but you never know how the season's going to end until it's ended, really.
Yeah, there is that.
That sounded like Will Buxton saying that.
Season's not over until it's over.
But I did see the pictures of what you could see through the fog. It was a very nice day to be out testing, and in his first outing in a Ferrari, it wasn't particularly nice weather, but the Ferrari fans were out in force.
That's good to see.
In the drizzle and the rain and the fog. Also, in the Lewis Hamilton news, he is back with his trainer / assistant Angela. We're big Angela Cullen fans on this podcast. I don't know if you know that, but you have to be an Angela fan now.
Angela fan club.
We spoke of getting her on. Yeah, she was away for 2 years, I think, and now she's back on his side.
Big time. I think she's too big time for this podcast, Ellie, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think she's definitely a bit too big time for this. Hey, maybe we'll get Oliver Behrman on. He's a local lad.
Yeah.
He's from Chelmsford. I'll reach out to him. Harass him on social media and get a restraining order or something.
Well, on the note of Oliver Behrman, Els, is it Behrman or Behrman? Tweet us at Rear Winging It. What's our handle, Els?
We can't use Twitter anymore, Kieran. It's been banned.
Oh, sorry. Instagram us on Rear Winging It.
At
F1.
Rear Winging It.
At Rear Winging It.
No, it's just at Rear Winging It. Yeah.
Oh,
no,
Instagram us at Rear Winging It and let us know if you think it's Behrman or Behrman. Hashtag.
I think it's a bear because his helmet has the bear on the top and his logo is a bear.
But maybe that's just some clever marketing from his point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I did go to school with a Beerman. Spelled
Might
the
be
same
related.
way. Maybe they're related. Yeah.
There you go.
Maybe I'll track him down and get him on the podcast.
But on the note of Oliver Behrman,
yes,
that was one of the more interesting twists and turns of the last season, Els. What would be your one big highlight, big memorable moment from last year?
One big memorable. Do you know what? Memorable, not necessarily in a good way, was we had driver changes mid-season.
Indeed, drama.
And I think a lot of people were sad to see, particularly Daniel Ricciardo and stuff go. But mid-season changes are always quite a big deal. It feels different in the paddock, and they're often the reserve drivers and they're lurking about. And
yeah.
But I think people come in and did a good job, and obviously Oliver Behrman had to fill in a couple times, and he did a good job. So
yeah, he did.
Yeah, hopefully he does well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if it's not the Nick De Vries effect taking place, where turns up for a few races, looks good, give him a proper seat, and suddenly not the same driver. But we'll have to wait and see on that one. So that's gonna be something to watch coming up next year. I think for me, the most memorable moment for me was the Brazil Grand Prix, and that performance by Max Verstappen, I think, really put in place the fact he earned that championship last year, being in not the most dominant car for a lot of the year. That was one of the best drives I think we'll see in the last few years, and probably the next few. That was one of the best ones we're going to see, I think.
Yeah, I agree, especially on the run that they'd been in since May. He'd been, on the podium there and thereabouts, but I don't think he'd won a race for, 9 races or something ridiculous for them.
No, exactly.
And to come in with a performance like that at that time, it was so important, and it killed off the championship really. And it was definitely, he maybe had the fastest car, maybe he didn't, but that was definitely a performance where you can't say he didn't deserve the title.
Yeah, exactly. I saw a stat the other day. I think it was he's not finished a race outside of the top 10, so he's not scored a point whilst finishing a race since he was 18 years old, something like that.
Yeah, I saw that same thing. Obviously, he's had a few DNFs, a few crashes, especially a few memorable crashes.
But that just goes to show his level of consistency throughout the year, and I think that's really what brought it home for him, was just that he didn't, as much as a bad day he could have had, he got as many points as possible out of that car each week.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when you get, grid penalties for, causing collisions or needing a new engine or whatever you incur your penalties for, he still manages to work his way back into the points, time and time again, whether that's help. The strategy obviously has to be there to back you up to pit at the right time and onto the right tyres, but you can't, you can't climb through like that without pace, exactly, and the skill to do it. And obviously he is an aggressive driver, and some people would say he's a bit too aggressive, but it makes an exciting race when he does have to climb through the pack.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the kind of racer you want to see in the pack, fighting for those positions. You don't necessarily want to see him 20 seconds up the road, because that's not that exciting, and you don't get to see much of his driving. He doesn't get much airtime, but when he's actually fighting, battling, and hopefully we see a bit more of that in the coming season. We'll get a bit more action between the teams, between the drivers.
Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully not too many crashes, but a crash is always a bit exciting.
I mean, they're always going to happen, I suppose, aren't they? But
Yeah, exactly. Do you think that as a driver, Max has become a bit less reckless in the last few years?
I think you could have thought that before about the midway point of last season. But I think when he didn't have the fastest car, some of his driving was just over the line at points last year. And,
Yeah.
you know, you can always argue maybe he had to be to keep himself in with a chance of a championship. But I think sometimes when you're running people off the road, it's just not acceptable. So I think maybe he's more strategic with what he's doing and about his own, not his own safety in terms of his own ability to crash. Maybe he's smart about that. But I don't think he's a less aggressive driver by any means.
Yeah, I think he's definitely a bit wiser, but he came into the sport so young. I think we forget he's one of the more experienced drivers on the grid, but considering you have two 40-year-olds driving in, you know, maybe the Aston Martin wasn't a top team last year, but you have two somewhat competitive 40-year-old drivers. It puts into perspective, even though he is very experienced compared to some of the other drivers on the grid, he is also very young still.
Still young,
and
yeah.
It's a sport you can compete in for a long time. I know he's expressed his desire to do other things and to try other disciplines.
Yeah,
But
I don't think he'll make it out of this decade, in my opinion. I don't think he'll get through to 2030. No. There, you heard it here first.
Do you not think?
I don't think he'll make it to 2030.
Do you think that's because he'll go off the boil, because he'll seek something else?
He'll just get tired of it. He's already kind of expressing now he's kind of tired of it. You got to think he's already been on the grid for like 8-9 years or something like that.
That's the thing. He's in his mid-20s, but he's already been around so long. He's
been on the grid since he was 17.
Already.
Exactly. He's been an F1 driver since he was 17. So for him, he's coming up on. He'll be, if he's not already, he's going to come up on a decade of F1 experience, and that and 4 championships in his back pocket. Maybe he thinks that's enough, you know?
Yeah, maybe. Speaking of experience, Kieran, how long have you been driving?
Not very long at all. 0.
Is that 0? I do think he won't be around for that much longer, but
no.
The end of the decade, yeah, maybe I agree. That's still 5 seasons.
Yeah.
You know,
I'd like to see him. I think
drivers get.
I'd like to see him leave Red Bull before his career's ended, though, just to see him in another race seat. I think would be really interesting, because I suppose he spent his entire career in the Red Bull family, as it were. So to see him leave, whatever that looks like one day, that would be really interesting to see if he has any interest in that before he retires.
Well, I think Toto's made it clear he wouldn't mind Max taking a
I don't think
seat.
anyone would take anyone on the grid is lying if they say they wouldn't take Max.
Yeah.
They're all lying if they say they wouldn't.
I think that's one of the reasons why Mercedes tied Antonelli down, because he's 17 himself. He's incredibly young. Yeah. But I heard Toto. He said, "I missed out on Max. I'm not missing out on this kid."
Yeah.
So even though the feeling is perhaps Antonelli might not be quite there this year, I think they're hoping putting him in the Mercedes. Perhaps slightly before his time will play dividends for next year when the new regulations come in. I think they want to hit the ground running.
Will be interesting. It's always interesting the year before a regulation change to see what kind of cars people come up with, because sometimes you do get the impression that even the top teams kind of, if they're not going to be at the front of the pack at the cutting edge, you dial it back a bit, you focus on next year. So it'll be interesting to see who turns up really quick and aggressive week 1, and seeing how it develops throughout the season will be really interesting.
I think for me, the team I'm most looking forward to watching is Aston Martin, that journey over the season, because of course they have Adrian Newey coming into the team, but he I don't believe starts work until March.
No, he had a really long gardening leave period, so I don't think he's actually really had any impact on this year's car.
Yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see, does he focus entirely on the new regulations and hopes? hope to get that completely right as he has done in the past, or do they want to be a bit more competitive this year, and is he gonna be working on upgrades throughout the season? Because if he is, then there's the expectation, especially along with their new wind tunnel and their new factory and everything good that has come with Lawrence Stroll.
Yeah,
I think it'll be interesting to see if they're able to become a more competitive outfit throughout the process of the season.
it is funny that a team that was accused of just copying Red Bull's every idea has just gone ahead and hired their chief aerodynamicist instead.
Well, they did have a pink Mercedes one year, so obviously they're open to copying anybody.
I'd say that, yeah, if all of a sudden Ferrari are fastest this year, we'll be calling it the green Ferrari in 2026. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, Tom Brady went to the Tampa Bay and they won a championship, right? So you can take somebody's star player and you can have your own success. So maybe that's what they'll have with Adrian Newey.
Yeah, potentially. I thought you were referencing Lewis Hamilton more to the point.
Oh, maybe more to the point. I'm not sure if the Ferrari are going to be competitive. I think it would be nice if we have 3 or 4 teams battling it out, but you never know where their heads are for the season before, as you say, before a big regulation change.
Yeah, but on to what we think of next season. I do think, given how the last season ended, that how many race winners were there? I think everyone apart from Perez in the top 4 teams won a race at some point. So it is going to be interesting to see if that repeats again, if we're going to have such an even field. And if it is such an even field, who does that suit, you know? What driver, what team are going to benefit most from having those scrappy battles? Who's going to have the best strategy? It's going to be super interesting to see. Yeah.
I think if McLaren can have less embarrassing driver chats on the radio, like, Lando, give him the place back. Lando, give him the place. Oh, it was cringy to watch.
Do you think McLaren will learn from that going into this year?
They have to. I think that they have a strong driver lineup. And that showed last year. They won the constructors. Obviously, it was close in the end between them and Ferrari, but I think the reason that Red Bull didn't win the constructors is because they had Perez, and Perez was a massive liability for them.
Yeah.
Who do you think has the strongest driver lineup then on the grid?
Oh, interesting to say. I think. Wow. Oh, that's a very good question. I think just because we haven't seen Antonelli at Mercedes, you have to rule them out. I think it's got to be, for me, it's probably got to be between, in terms of a pair, in terms of a duo, it's got to be between Ferrari and McLaren for me at the moment. Lewis Hamilton.
I would agree, but I will
7-time champ.
I will throw out a rogue suggestion, and I will
Please
say
do.
The Williams pairing of Sainz and Albon. Albon, as our regular listeners will know, I'm a fan of Albon. He's learned to keep his head down and get on with his job, and he's done a really good job at Williams. And I know he may not have had the strongest teammates to beat, but he has beaten them all convincingly. And I think Sainz will go, and hopefully he'll have a successful time. And success at Williams is very different to success at Ferrari. Success at Ferrari is championships, and they weren't able to do that. But success at Williams is perhaps finishing 8th.
Oh, I think they already did this year. I think that's harsh. I think firmly establishing themselves in the midfield would be I think that's what Williams are looking at. I think as well that is a 2026 project. I think that is what Carlos Sainz will be looking more towards than 2025, to be honest. But hey, that'll be interesting to see. Interesting to see which teams from the midfield make that leap, if any make that leap, with the new set of regulations. But I think saying that Sainz and Albon is better than Hamilton and Leclerc is a bit of a crazy statement else. Bit of a
I
crazy
think they'll
statement.
work well together, and I think it's easier
I'm
to
sure.
work well with your teammate when you're at a lower down team because there's less at stake.
Yeah, you're not competing for race wins and podiums. You're competing for 2 or 3 points. It's,
Because
the ego gets parked a little bit more. Yeah,
it's a sport where your teammate can also be your biggest rival, and that's
for sure.
That's obviously more extreme at the higher ends. If we saw, when we saw it with Piastri and Norris last year, weren't particularly friendly towards each other when there were race wins involved.
Yeah. Well, going back onto Ferrari, we have seen before how Charles Leclerc can be when a multiple driving championship winner comes into the team, when he would pair up with Sebastian Vettel. Plenty of fireworks there, multiple incidents where they hit each other. In a way, driving Sebastian Vettel out of the team in the end because of their favoritism towards the younger, up-and-coming Leclerc. How do you think Ferrari are going to manage that this year? Because Lewis isn't going to want to be there to build up a younger driver. He's there to win his 8th championship in history. But at the same time, Leclerc's not going to want to sit back and say, this is your team now, old man. How do you think they're going to manage that situation?
Yeah, it's always going to be difficult. I think Leclerc maybe does have the rub of the green. Is that the expression? He's their established driver. He speaks Italian and he knows the team already. You also speak Italian. Congratulations. Maybe we'll get Angela on, and then Angela can hire you as Lewis Hamilton's tutor.
I'll take that, Angela. If you're listening, just send us an Instagram at Real Winging It, and we'll get in touch.
Yeah, we will get in touch. If Angela messaged me, I'd probably get a tattoo on my forehead that said Angela Collins sent me a message. But back to your question about Ferrari. I think even though Leclerc is a younger driver, he's not a young driver, and he's been around for a long time. So I guess he has to get his elbows out and show why he has a claim to be the number one driver. But I would say going into the season that you would probably want to say we don't have an out-and-out number one, and then as the season progresses, that can be established if it needs to be. If there is a battle going on that one of them's in and the other isn't, then yes, the priority can go a certain way. But I think at the beginning, you really just have to let them race and find their own pecking order.
Agreed. I always say with something like that, though, you don't want to. Well, interesting to say. I mean, both drivers were out-qualified. Well, were they out-qualified? Outperformed generally from their teammates last year, which is an interesting situation. You could argue that overall, Russell was more impressive, at least in qualifying pace, than Hamilton was last year. And on the flip side, Sainz had the more memorable results than Leclerc did at Ferrari.
Yeah.
So, looking at the form book, it's hard to say who's going to be the favourite in that battle. Leclerc's used to, as you said, he's used to the team, he's used to the setup of the car. That might play into his favour, But then again, we're talking about Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time World Championship winner. So the only thing we're leaving it up to chance like that for the first few weeks is how many points are they going to leave on the table, If they're squabbling for first and they end up second and third and they're scrapping race wins, they're going to have to make that decision sooner rather than later, no matter who's on top or if they're looking quite tired at the time.
I guess if after, qualifying down in Australia, the first race, I believe, I guess if you qualify first, maybe they'll be like, okay, we'll give them precedent for this race. Because as you say, you don't want them squabbling, you don't want to leave anything out there. And I think we've seen teams in the past who into team battles have cost them, and you always say, oh, they should learn from it, but they never seem to learn from it.
No, I mean,
and Hamilton's had issues with teammates in the past.
Exactly, Hamilton's first season in F1 with Alonso, they were the fastest car, but their squabbling between each other left them second and third, and the championship got away from them, didn't it? The Drivers' Championship. So we'll see how they play that. I think in modern F1 though, it does seem to be a bit more meritocratic. It's not the same as back in the day when Schumacher forced his teammates to let him overtake. So we'll see how it goes. Or crashed
into people on purpose.
Yeah, well, exactly. Exactly. But give me your very early prediction, Els. Who do you think is going to win the Constructors' Championship this year,
Constructors,
2025?
I think it's Constructors is going to be a battle between McLaren and Ferrari. I think it's going to be more established than last year. The battle kind of played out towards the end. I think it's going to play out through the whole season. And I think it could down to the wire, and it will just be down on to consistency. Ferrari sometimes lack a bit of consistency and don't always have the best strategies. So I think McLaren are just going to pip it. That's what I'm saying.
Back to back.
What's your... Where are you? What way are you leaning?
See, I would have said the same, but I've got to say different than you, so someone gets a bragging rights at the end of the year. So I'm going to go ahead and say and put my money behind Ferrari this year. I think they're going to have enough in the tank with the driver lineup they've got to get over the line. Interesting that neither of us considered a Red Bull there at all. Even with Liam Lawson in the seat, we haven't spoke about him yet today. How do you think he's going to fare in that cursed second Red Bull seat over there?
I was going to say it is cursed. I would not want to be the driver in that seat. I'm sure you learn a lot from being in that team and being in that environment, but I think of all the 20 seats, I would prefer any of the other 19 than second driver at Red Bull. So I think it'll be interesting. It's a lot of, I would say it's a lot of pressure, but maybe on the
maybe it's not for that reason.
Last season, maybe because of Perez.
Yeah. Being better than Perez last season, if that's the benchmark, he should. I think Lawson's got enough talent to achieve that at least.
Yeah, I think we were all surprised by how long they stuck with Sergio Perez for.
I think we all
he brings in money. He's bringing in that Kit Kat money, but as you said, they've been so ruthless in the past with drivers that. Even for the RB team, the Visa Cash App RB, just to use their full names, other Cash Apps are available. They got rid of drivers midway last season, and they've done that in the past, and we've seen Albon got replaced, Daniel Kvyat got replaced. It's happened in the past. So
yeah, you got to think it might be financially related. Maybe the turmoil that they had throughout last year for various reasons, maybe that was part of a contributing factor. They just wanted to get that advertising money to the end of the year.
Yeah, and maybe, as you say, they were in a bit of turmoil, especially at the beginning of the season with the Christian Horner and then Helmut Marko stirring the pot, and then and then Max. There were rumours about him wanting to leave. Adrian Newey left. There was a lot of change going on, and maybe they just wanted to steady the ship and keep somebody in the seat. And would somebody else have come in at that time in the team and done a better job than him? Maybe, but maybe we'll get to the end of the season.
Cynically, maybe it was a welcome distraction. Maybe the headlines being about when are you going to drop Sergio Perez look better for Red Bull than when are you going to fire your team principal.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I guess he was made the scapegoat for their failures.
Oh, maybe that's harsh. I mean, he was underperforming. No one can take it. No one can deny that he wasn't driving to the best of. Well, he wasn't driving to the full capability of the car in front. He was sitting behind.
Yeah, I guess you could say the reason that they didn't win the constructors was because of him. But not only did they not win, they didn't come second.
Yeah, and that financially actually has quite a lot of implication. That's what affects your funding. Well, that's what affects your wind tunnel. Or maybe it was to guarantee themselves a bit more wind tunnel time. You never know.
You never know, exactly. And they're a team that can bring in the advertising money to make themselves up to the cost cap. It's not Haas
more they can spend to the cost cap plus. Exactly. Yeah. Well, as they have done in the past. but barely, we might add, but still.
Barely, yeah. It was very slight, and it was allegedly not spent on, it was spent on food or something
catering,
ridiculous. It wasn't catering, it wasn't performance enhancement. But potentially for a team like that, where they know that they can get the money coming in, but I think that they were so far off of it by the end, it wasn't. You couldn't say it was a conscious decision. Yeah. Interesting. Right, moving back towards 2025 then.
in the name of progress, let's say, the first ever female race engineer in F1 history this year, Els, in Laura Mueller with Ocon at Haas. As a woman yourself, what are your thoughts on that?
As the woman in the room, I will say, it's fantastic. It is fantastic. I think progress has to be made for the right reasons, and I'm going to assume she is the most qualified person for the job, and she has experience, and I think hopefully she does well, because otherwise, a predominantly male sport, both in the people who work in the sport and the people who watch the sport, she could be the reason why people say women aren't supposed to be here, and you just hope she does a good job so that they can't say that, and it opens the door for other women to come in. Obviously, people see females presenting in the sport, people see females like Susie Wolf trying to promote girls' ability, that she's trying to say, hey, girls can kart and we can compete and we can be just as good. So there are people to look up to, I would say, if you're a young girl.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be fantastic to see somebody in an engineering capacity to say,
yeah, I think it's great for the sport.
Women can do whatever they want.
I think it's great for the sport,
and it breaks down a barrier.
Yeah, exactly. It's sad there are barriers like that still, but at least if there are barriers, they're being broken. And in a way as well, it's maybe it's even a more feasible route to get yourself into F1. It's, I think having a female driver is super important, and that's always gonna, when that happens, that will, be very newsworthy and groundbreaking, as it should be. But for the average Joe, I mean, the average Joe is not going to become a racing driver no matter their gender. So maybe this is a more realistic career route into F1. Maybe that.
Exactly. There's huge financial costs. It's a very expensive sport to get into, whether you're male or female. You need to have the financial backing of a parent or family member, friend, company, whatever it is. And anybody can go and get a degree in engineering or whatever you need to do to become a Formula One race engineer. If you study hard, you can do anything, I guess. And that's, I hope she does a great job, not just because she's a woman, but because I hope everybody does a good job. But it'd just be nice if I'm sure she'll be very, very aware of the position she is in, and I'm sure that she will be somewhat daunted by the prospect. It's difficult because she has the weight of so many women in STEM. She has that extra pressure on her shoulders, I suppose, to do that job, because sadly, let's be honest, how often does the announcement of Haas's race engineer for one of their drivers make the headlines? It doesn't really, does it? But the fact that she is the first woman in that role in the sport just puts that extra pressure on her shoulders, and we'll see how she gets on. I wish her all the best. Yeah, Haas have also announced their new head of strategy will also be female, but their team principal, he came out and he said they're not because they're women, they're because they're the most qualified,
they're the best candidates.
I did, for a team like Haas, I did think, well, hey, maybe they're paying them less money and it keeps them in the budget cap, but that's a very cynical view of the situation.
Cynical,
I'm sure they are. Cynical. I'm sure they are the most qualified, and I hope they do well.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
So I'm sure they will. Last week, you went to the Formula One exhibition at the Excel.
I did indeed. Yes, I did.
Did you learn anything?
Yeah, it was very interesting. It was really fun. I'd recommend it to all the good day out for all the family. Yeah, it was really interesting. Learn a lot about the aerodynamics of the cars and how it evolved, the engines as well, the materials they use and use now. I found the most interesting part for me was to talk about safety and how that's evolved in the sport, because you have a little section on safety and you turn the corner, and then in front of you in a big glass box in a dark room is the chassis of Grosjean's car after that crash in Bahrain. and they got a little video playing, and here's a monologue of him getting out the car, and he's like, I need to see my kids again. It just puts it in perspective how far it has come, because you can't.
He rose like a phoenix through the flames.
Through the
I
flames.
remember watching that crash.
Exactly.
I
But to see
remember
the
watching
outcome
that
of
crash
it
and
was scary. Honestly, scary.
Yeah, I imagine it was quite mutilated, the chassis.
Yeah, well, you couldn't tell it was a Haas car, as it were. Like it was just burnt. It was ash covered. It was grey instead of the black, just because it had been burnt to an absolute crisp. So, yeah. But the steering wheel as well was there. The buttons were melted. Terrifying stuff.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because obviously he did end up with burnt hands, but it was definitely quite powerful. I remember hearing him speak. He was sitting there waiting for death, and he just thought, no, I can't leave my wife and my children. I've got to do everything I can until there's no breath left in me, until there's no fight left. So, it was very powerful, but it puts into perspective what they risk, for this sport.
Exactly.
We watch as entertainment, and, we sit here and chat about it, and we have our debates, but it's easy to forget that they're real humans risking their lives.
Humans involved,
I think it's easy to forget that. Especially, thankfully, there's less crashes. Of course, we've grown up in a time where it's been relatively safe, but our parents and used to watch Formula One where it wasn't uncommon for someone to be dying.
Yeah.
A few times a season. So I think,
if not more, to be honest. Yeah.
Luckily. Exactly. Luckily, we've grown up in a much safer Formula One era.
Well, there's plenty of mention as well about Imola '94, the weekend that Senna died. Oh, and another driver, I can't remember his name. I'm gonna have to look him up.
Yeah, Senna wasn't the first driver to die that weekend.
No, another driver died in qualifying, if I remember right.
And I think they had a discussion to say, should we continue with the weekend, and they did.
And they did.
Obviously,
it was Roland Ratzenberger.
Maybe.
Just to give him the respect, he's also the driver who passed away that weekend at San Marino. But that
definitely
2 in a weekend really shocked people into action, and I think it's a better sport for it, to be honest.
Oh, definitely. I think Niki Lauda was a big driving force for that. Him and having himself escaped a horrific crash, and obviously he bore the scars of that for the rest of his life, but he was very vocal about it, and he worked hard to make it a safer sport, and that's, I think, his greatest legacy. Not only was he a fantastic driver, he's saved the lives of so many others, and even more recent innovations like the Halo. Hamilton was against it at first, and then he had the crash where Max drove over the top of his car,
the top of his head,
and he said I'd have been dead. He had a tire mark on the top of his helmet.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Unbelievable. But in another year, he'd have died, and because of the Halo, he didn't. So I think.
Yeah. But on the topic of Niki Lauda, Els, and that makes me think of one of the best F1 films I've seen. We are losing a team off the grid this year. Apex GP will no longer be appeaing at the racetrack for the new film. What do you make of the new F1 movie? Are you excited?
Do you know what? It's going to be hard to watch it with a straight face because
I'm a bit worried about it.
All of the bits where they've been doing, the driver parade and the national anthem, and there's just been Brad Pitt standing there, and I think the other drivers have kind of had to act along with it, so it'll be interesting to see their acting prowess.
Oh god, that's going to be a nightmare.
For
me, I saw
I hope it was.
I saw a behind the scenes clip of I think Brad Pitt like staggering up the track and then passing out, and I saw a comment is like, when have you ever seen that in the last like decade of F1 ever? So that seems like that is a bit worrying to me that maybe they've over Hollywooded already quite a dramatic sport. So I'll be giving it a watch though. I'll give it a go, see what it's like, but that's not going to come out for a while, I suppose. Yeah, but I say maybe when it comes out we'll do a live review. Let us know. Message us on Instagram. Let us know. Let us know if you want us to review the F1 movie when it comes out.
I definitely think, obviously, you were joking about Rush, which is about James Hunt and Niki Lauda. That was a
Great
good film,
film.
but even
Really
people
good
said
film.
that was it took its liberties, shall we say? But
Yeah, it
was
certainly
fantastic
did. But I
film.
think fantastic film, and what a season as well. What a season that was. If we can have a season half as good in the year 2025, I'll be happy.
I love how we talk about these, oh, what a season. We weren't there. We weren't,
Yeah.
we weren't watching it.
It was the 80s. We were not about. Was it even the 80s or the 70s? I don't even know when it was.
We were not born. The good old days.
We were but a twinkle in our father's eye at that point.
Yes. So also at the Formula One exhibition, I guess we come from it from sporting fans. We'll watch pretty much any sport. We don't come from it from an engineering side or a petrol head side. So was it interesting to learn about those other parts of the sport?
Yeah, it was. The early development of the sport was super interesting, like how they came to use like the chassis they use now, going from a roll, like a steel cage roll bar situation, into I think it's a monocoque, they call it, like a monocoque chassis. So basically a chassis made out of one continuous piece of metal. It was fascinating for me, and the applications that it has in the real world as well. During the COVID pandemic, Mercedes helped make a really quick design for some CPAP machines to help people breathe better when they're having really bad COVID. So it just goes to show that the sport drives on, and the technological change it leaves in its wake has real world impacts on people. It genuinely helps society and improves
it's not necessarily
it's really interesting to see.
The best for the environment, but
that is a point.
There's technology that's come from it in the energy harvesting hybrid cars that has had real world implications, and I guess it's a bit like NASA. It wastes a lot of money, and it's not great for the environment, but it changes the way we do things, and I think that's fantastic. So how long were you in the museum? Exhibition, because I know you read every single sign in painstaking detail.
Kat was sitting at the end waiting for me multiple times. A couple hours. It wasn't too long. 2 hours, I'd say. But I was proud of myself, and you'll be proud of me. I saw a Mercedes car. I looked at it and I went, "What year is that?" And I didn't look at the badges on the other side. And I looked at the chassis. I looked at it was Lewis number 44. I looked at it and I went,
2014.
That's 2016. That no, it wasn't 2014. I was like. No, because the nose was a bit different from the 2014. I was like, it was a bit.
The 2014 one's quite noses. Distinctive.
Because of the bridge.
The rear wing.
But no, 2016. I went around the corner. Boom, Lewis Hamilton 2016 car. Nailed it.
Congratulations. What are your final thoughts then? This is my favourite segment. You tried to cut it out, and I said no. If you're coming on my podcast, you're having my segments. So what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts. I think next season's is shaping up really nicely. I think the end of last year, how it played out in the end, with a dominant-ish drivers' championship, but a really open constructors. It's going to be fun to see. New driver lineups all across the paddock. A year before a big change in regulations again. I think we're in for a great year. Over to you, Ellie, for your final thoughts. Take us home.
My final thoughts are, yes, we have a lot of rookies. As you were saying, a big shift in the driver lineup. We've got a lot of rookies, and I feel like the last time we had this many rookies was when we had Norris and Leclerc and Russell, and they were all rookies at the same time. Was Albon a rookie that year as well? I think that
I think so. Yeah, we had a big batch.
4 of them were rookies at the same time. And we're going to have a big batch of rookies this year, so hopefully we've got some future stars. We've not got a
Zhou Guan Yu winning Rookie of the Year by himself situation again. Yeah, there's going to be that's a good point. Why don't we end on our Rookie of the Year predictions?
All right, my Rookie of the Year prediction is... Well, I know there's some debate about whether or not he counts as a rookie because he's already raced, but I'm going to go for Behrman, or Beerman, as Kieran likes to say.
I am going to go out on a limb and say Antonelli. I think, he's in one of the faster cars. If he strings together a couple of podiums, hard to look further than him.
Yeah, he definitely has higher expectations than
true. That
than
is
somebody
true.
Driving in a Haas. So
Exactly.
We shall see. Haas, sometimes they come to a race and they turn up. So we'll see how.
Yeah, we'll see. That's a good point. We'll see how they turn up this year. Yeah, much to look forward to. Much to look forward to,
and we'll be along for the ride.
We will.
Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, yeah, I've hardly had you. You've kind of led the show, if I'm honest. You've been steering the ship.
Well, someone had to. Someone had to take us through the Ellie's misspelt note. She spelt her own brother's name wrong, just for the record. Just let the record show.
Well, there shouldn't be so many vowels in it.
Right, we've come to talk about your spelling, Elle.
They named you.
We've come to talk about your spelling, Elle, so I think it's time to end the podcast now.
Yeah, I think it's time to end. All right, then. We shall see you on our next episode.
We shall. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.